So much for choosing Morning Live. Now, the 20th annual Steve Biko Memorial Lecture was held at the weekend and was delivered by American civil rights activist Reverend Al Sharpton. It signified the role that was played by Biko and many others during the struggle for freedom and liberation in this country. And as the country remembers those struggle heroes, questions still arise on whether the post-apartheid government is resolute to bringing about justice for the victims of apartheid and their families. And to this end, families such as the Bikos, the Aggetts, the Simelanes, the Calatas, the Timols and others are still waiting for justice after the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in the 90s that ended in the early 2000s. And following a recent webinar which explored the unresolved business of the TRC, we are joined now by Yasmin Sooka, who was TRC Commissioner and also the Executive Director of the Foundation for Human Rights, as well as Thembi Nkadimeng, the sister of former uMkhonto Sizwe operative Nokuthula Simelane, who was abducted, tortured and possibly murdered by apartheid police. Ladies, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you, and good morning to you and your listeners.
Good morning, Yasmin.
Yasmin, I'm going to start with you. Following that recent webinar by the Foundation for Human Rights about the cases that are still unresolved, let's talk about those, because this speaks then ultimately to how effective the TRC was as a process.
Thank you, Sakina, for that question. As you know, really, South Africa, when it became a new country, a new democratic country, really should have prosecuted the perpetrators of apartheid crimes. But one of the compromises that was reached in order to allow the new South Africa to come into being was a compromise which provided for a conditional amnesty. And that amnesty meant that if you applied and you made full disclosure, then of course you would not go to prison if you were granted amnesty, or if you were in prison, you would be released. But if that did not happen, then of course the law had to follow its course. And so the Commission, at the end of its period of hearings, and after it handed in its final report, it had compiled a list of 300 cases which it could not fully investigate, and it handed that over to Bulelani Nuka for further investigation and prosecutions. And when the Priority Crimes Unit was set up in the NPA, he designated the apartheid-era crimes as priority crimes. And of course, in the period since that, and you know, when I started at the foundation in 2001, from that moment on, we began to engage around what was going to happen to these cases. And quite shockingly, we believed that they were going to get the attention that they deserve, because after all, the TRC had done its work. It had provided the foundation, but it was now up to the new state and its institutions to take the battle on. And of course, we discovered in the case we brought around Nokuthula Simelane that in fact there had been political interference, and the former NDPP Vusi Pikoli filed an affidavit in which he said that one of the reasons he was suspended was because he was actually implementing the justice component of the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And so I think this is a question that has consistently come up during the years, including in the Timol matter, when we also discovered that not only had the NPA placed a moratorium on these cases, but that the Hawks had also decided as early as 2003 that they were not going to investigate these matters. And the only reason we've been able to have the first indictment of a death squad in the Simelane matter is because of the foundation support and because of the drive of people like Thembi Nkadimeng and her family. And they're the people who have been the driving force. We've had to hire private investigators. We've had to take the NPA to court to ensure that there would be justice. And this has happened with both the Timor matter. We have at least 31 cases which we call open, which are sitting with the NPA at this point. And what we expect from them is that they are going to come to the party as well. But to be frank, to date, we haven't seen any sign of that commitment.
Thembi, last year, the court granted your family a provisional presumption of death order for your sister, Nokuthula Simelane, and that's 36 years after she disappeared, presumed murdered by the security branch officers. Do you feel at this point, though, a step closer to finding justice? Because I think justice is the operative word here.
Well, justice is very elusive, Sakina. Justice for us and my family only remains a rumor. We haven't seen it, we haven't heard about it. We have fought for it at every given time. So, to be honest with you, I feel that we have been denied justice. As you correctly put it, that we received the provisional order of my declaring my sister dead, and the case was then set to sit on the 5th of October this year. But boom, we have received the notice from the NPA. The case is not ready to continue for reasons like a senior counsel for the perpetrators alleged passed away somewhere around July. But in my mind, I'm like, if someone is a lawyer, passed away 3 months before the case, you can brief another one and tabulate the case. But to be honest with you, as Yasmin has said, the NPA has not done investigations thoroughly with regard to my sister's case. We have done the investigations ourselves, and we are on record having said to the NPA, come, we will share the notes with you so we can get a watching brief, because to be honest, you are compelled by the court to charge, and you didn't do a thorough investigation. You may not be confident about the case. So I think it's more about postponements leading to another. So from 5th October, I don't know where we will go to. After we spent the whole of 2020 and half of 2019. So I think it's still really a rumor, as I say.
And your family, Thembi Nkadimeng, at least has had the support of Yasmin's foundation and others. And you look at the Timols family, you look at the Aggetts. But Yasmin, it raises huge questions for other families who may not have the financial or other resources to actually seek justice.
I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, you should remember...
Thembi, I'll just give Yasmin a chance and you can also respond to that.
You know, we had hired Frank Dutton to go through all of the amnesty applications and the 300 cases. And we then compiled a short list of 200 cases, which we said to the NPA should be prioritized. We went through those cases too, and we then brought up a list of around 22 cases, but that list is expanded, as I've said, to about 32 cases, which we see as active and where we're trying to promote some form of justice for the families. In some cases, like the Cradock 4, we believe that we are ready for an indictment, not only of the foot soldiers, but also of the political, the politicians who sat at the State Security Council and in fact who gave the orders for the signal to take them out. And so we have a number of cases where we are saying these could be dealt with by way of a reopened inquest, but these in fact need an indictment. And more recently, as last week, we in fact applied to the Matali municipality for the exhumation of the COSAS 4. And then we were quite shocked when we heard that the NPA was going to oppose that application because they believed it's premature. And the question we were asking is, more than 25 years later, how much more time do you need to decide that the exhumation needs to go ahead? So this is the kind of, stop and start process, which, to be frank, is, I would say, a scathing indictment of our state, of the Hawks and the NPA. And I think it's high time that they face, the court, of course, in the Timols matter made it very clear that they found political interference both at the level of the state and the NPA. And in fact, they asked the state and the NPA to investigate who was at the heart of the political interference. So these are not facts that are in dispute any longer. These are facts which are on record before a court, and we've yet to see any kind of investigation into that. And that is why Lukanya Kalata, on behalf of many of the victims' families, has gone to the Zondo Commission. He's made a submission, and he's asked Judge Zondo to investigate what he has called state interference, which is another form of state capture, we believe.
Thembi, you wanted to comment on that as well?
Well, I think Yasmin has covered fairly a great deal on the fact, just to showcase the unwillingness of the NPA to deal with the cases which were tabulated in the TRC Act to deal with them. But also, just on the last point on that part, Sakina, you spoke about families, ourselves being fortunate to be assisted, the Credit for in tears on behalf of Ahmed Timols. Yasmin, I sit and get calls, letters from people who don't know me, who have got their cases referred to the NPA and nothing happens. Particularly cases which happened in Swaziland. People will ask me, please accompany us to the graveyards to go and look for our own. And most of those people come to us because they read about us, they hear about us on radio, and they think these people are closer to what they are looking for. I get calls from as far as Free State.
Yeah.
And
I can believe that.
Help us.
Yeah.
You know, so it's painful. There are many people who are in a situation like us, and all they need is the NPA to give them assistance so they could be able to see justice. I mean, why is a grave of a murdered MK person still not found in a Swaziland graveyard? Had we been committed? So we should have gone there, look for the grave, assist the family, come and rebury it in South Africa where they stay and where they belong. But also, just take them to that grave, even if it means you can't exhume it. But you can't give them a piece that your son died on this date, in this house, was shot by so. These police have applied for amnesty, and that's all. They were granted amnesty, bye-bye. But what did the TRC say? Says assist the families, assist the victims in any way that they think they can find clues. And this family went through the TRC, abide by the TRC, applications were made, they were granted amnesty, those who were perpetrators. They must take us to that grave so the family can grieve. And that woman, the mother of that son, is turning 92 this year. So for how long must she cry? She's about to die, obviously, and without having seen a gravesite of his son. I think it's a grave injustice on all forms.
It's an absolute blight, you know, and as Yasmin said, an indictment on who we are right now as a nation, because it has to go beyond just government and holding government entities accountable, Yasmin. It has to go to ordinary South Africans also coming out and making their voices heard in terms of getting justice for these families. And Yasmin, you were one of the TRC commissioners. You worked at the commission, worked on compiling the final report. So just a quick snapshot in terms of what happened and what hasn't happened in terms of the recommendations, because one of the other issues that you were also, as the TRC, looking at was that of reparations. What has happened in that regard?
Yeah, thank you for that question, because when we talk about the unfinished business, we're really talking, I would say, if you isolate it to three components, the most important part being the prosecution's part, then, of course, reparations for victims and their families, and the third is, of course, access to our archives. If I can tell you that, as you know, far back as last week, we had a meeting with the TRC unit in the Department of Justice to discuss the fact that the reparations question remains unresolved, and that we dispute the way in which they want to deal with community reparations. And in fact, we've said that in the years since the TRC handed over its report, we have yet to see a policy framework on reparations that has come from the government, and yet they want to disburse the President's Fund without discussing with South Africans and with the victims how this money should in fact be disbursed. There's an enormous amount of money in the President's Fund, and the debate for the last 5 years has been around their interpretation of reparation and of course ours, and also what constitutes a community that should have received reparations. So this remains another outstanding issue. Then, of course, on the question of archives, every time you want to access a record, you have to go through this very painful PIA process where a bureaucrat will tell you that you can't have access to a document. And then, of course, you make an application to court, and at the doors of the court, the department will settle. Now, this is not the way to handle what should be accessible records to South Africans, especially families. We need to ensure that these records are preserved, that they're open, and that they're available to family members. And as we stand now, this can't happen. But it goes beyond these questions. You know, many people ask me the question, why do we have to waste our time and resources on dealing with these old matters? And I say to them that when you look at the question of institutional reform, which goes to the heart of the question of non-repetition, you will never transform South Africa or the police or the security services or the institutions of government if you do not dismantle these structures which still remain within the state and which in fact prevent the rule of law. And dealing with these cases is in fact the way in which you make the link between what happened during our apartheid past and what is happening in South Africa today. And the same goes for the issue of corruption. When you look at the fact that you've had a collusion between business and government officials, I think the question you need to ask, as Henny van Vieren has, is this actually goes back to the way in which the state operated with business during the apartheid years as well. And all of these are things we need to uncover. And as you rightly put it, this is not just about the state and the families of victims. This is about us as South Africans. We are fighting really for the integrity of the struggle that we fought for. And what we are fighting for is justice and accountability, without which you cannot really build the rule of law.
Yasmin, you spoke about money there. How much money are we actually talking about?
I think that there's something like a couple of millions, actually $1 billion almost in the President's Fund. I stand to be corrected because I haven't looked at the last amount, but from my discussions last week, it's quite a large amount of money.
So we unfortunately have to start wrapping this conversation, but you know, it's an ongoing conversation. Thembi Nkadimeng, what would you like to see as families happen going forward from here on in?
Well, Sakina, it's a fact that we no longer even have families. My father has died, my mom is 80, my brother died. So who will the truth find when the NPA feel it's important for them? These are old cases. Perpetrators themselves are dying. Victims themselves are dying. So, which is a fact enough why as families we need closure. I mean, the wife, Nyamega Koniwe, just was buried last week. I went with court to her in 2007, if I'm not wrong, to force the state to begin to charge the perpetrators. And she has passed on in 2020. But in 2007, she went to court. So she has died without seeing justice. So, and I think that's what we are pleading as families, that can we see the wheels of justice moving faster so that families can be able to get to the bottom of the truth, find closure. There's nothing as painful as seeing my mom talking about her disappeared daughter every day. That's a pain I don't wish to anybody else. And I think all families are going through that. And we are pleading with the NPA because nobody else can be able to do this, unfortunately. That can the wheels of justice turn faster. so that we can be able to see justice at the end. Thank you very much, Sakina.
Thank you so much, Thembi Nkadimeng. Yasmin Sooka, you have the final word on this. Will you be taking action against the NPA? Because as Thembi Nkadimeng says, like to see the wheels of justice moving faster. They seem to have not moved at all for some people.
Well, we have, sent a recent letter and memo to the NPA saying that the current system doesn't work. The decentralization policy doesn't work, and we need a new approach. And we've provided them with comparative research on setting up a new unit and a new process to deal with these cases. We've also asked for a meeting with them, and in fact, I'm in the process of arranging that meeting with the Deputy NDPP, Rodney de Kock, in which we hope we can begin to explore how we can take these cases forward. We have a very short window of opportunity because on both sides we have victims dying and we have their family members dying, and we also have perpetrators who are key to these cases also dying. And I think we do want to see justice in our lifetimes. That's what people gave their lives up for and sacrificed for, and that should not be in vain. But this is a South African issue, as you point out, and we hope that we can build the support of ordinary South Africans who will say that justice is imperative if our new country has to be restored to dignity and if victims are going to live with freedom in their lifetimes and dignity.
Thank you so much, Yasmin Sooka from the Foundation for Human Rights, and Thembi Nkadimeng, sister of former ANC MK operative Nokuthula Simelane, talking about the unresolved business of the TRC. We're going to take a quick